Hello, this here is my Colocasia Esculenta elephant's ear plant, or taro. And in this video I'm going to talk to you about Colocasia winter care or winter protection. But before I get started, let's just marvel at this amazing plant with its amazing leaves. And whilst we're looking at it now, I'll run some footage of when I planted this at the beginning of the season. Welcome back to marksgardenuk at Rose Cottage near Nantwich in Cheshire. We've not had any really cold nights yet, but all too soon winter will be upon us, and this plant just will not survive the UK winter. Any frost and it will be dead. So I've got to take drastic steps today to protect this. Now, it is still a couple of weeks or possibly even a month before we have any really severe frost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all the big leaves, dig them all up and plant them individually into pots, into some fine tilth topsoil. Then I'm going to leave them out here in the relatively warm air, and hopefully they'll start growing some new roots before it gets really cold. And if there's any sign of a forecast of temperatures below 4 degrees, I'm going to dash these into the shed, which is a frost-free environment, and I'll even show you in a moment what I'll do if there is a severe frost forecast, and that involves a candle and a plant pot and heating that shed. But first of all, unfortunately, I've got to do something quite brutal that makes me feel very sad, which is remove all the big leaves, and that will let me know what I'm dealing with. I'll be able to do a bit of an audit and see exactly how many plants I've got. And all these plants, and I believe there are over 20, possibly even 30 in this border, came from one corm about 6 years ago. And incidentally, all these are going to be for sale in the spring. I'm going to get them through the winter in pots, and when they start showing signs of growth, I'm going to put them up for sale. So if you want one of these, let me know. Now, I do have to get round a little bit of red tape. I need a license to issue plant passports, but I've spoken to the Plant Health Agency and that's ongoing, and by the spring I'll have my license. I'll be able to issue plant passports, and you'll be able to, if you want to, buy one of these wonderful, actually incredible elephant's ears plants. Just look at the size of that leaf. Now, as I dig them up, I'm going to place them on this piece of blue tarpaulin, and I'm going to put them all individually into an appropriately sized pot. There'll be some big, some medium and some small, and I'm going to plant them in this lovely fine topsoil that I actually used, that I created, should I say, when I used a trommel. And if you want to know what a trommel is and how it works, there's a video on my channel, and I'll put a link to that at the end of this video. But it was an incredible machine, and it just separated all the stones and rocks out of this lovely fine topsoil. So they'll all be planted in these pots, and when they stop growing, when it gets colder, I will stop watering them, and I'll put them in that shed and I'll let them dry out. You'll see me preparing all this in this video in a moment. So unfortunately, the first thing I've got to do is cut all the big leaves off. I'm just going to enjoy them for another minute or so before I decimate them. Aren't they beautiful? Really amazing. All this growth has come in the space of the last few months. I planted them into very rich soil that I'd really enhanced with lots of very well rotted manure. And actually underneath that soil, it's about 18 inches deep, there are compost bags to stop it draining, because these plants love wet conditions. And sadly, the reason I've got to remove all these leaves is because once these are dug up, all that leaf will put too much stress on the roots that survive. So I'm just going to go ahead now and remove all these leaves, but I will leave the most recent leaf in place. And the reason for that is that most recent leaf, as you can see here, if I just remove that big leaf out of the way there, that most recent leaf has the new leaf coming out of it. These plants create each new leaf almost from the stem of the old leaf. So I'll leave that one in place on every single one of these. But I'm afraid all the other leaves that don't have leaves growing out of them. In other words, all the ones that are not the most recent leaves are now going to be removed. Then I'll be able to see what I'm dealing with. Then I'll be able to use my fork to very gently dig each of these plants out. When I've started digging them out, we'll have a look at the anatomy of the corms at the bottom of each one of these plants, because it's really quite interesting. And I propagated all these from one corm at the beginning of the year, and you'll be able to see in a moment how that works. Let me get on with removing the majority of these leaves. I'll see you in a moment. So that's me. I've now removed all but the most recent leaf. Some of them have these lovely new leaves coming out of the most recent leaf's shoulder, if you like. So where that's the case, I've just left the new leaf. And some of them which are not yet producing new leaves, like this example here, I have actually left the most recent leaf. So I now can see what I'm dealing with. I can see quite a lot of soil, but also what's really interesting, I can see many, many small tiny colocasias starting to emerge from the base of some of these bigger, more mature plants. Let me give you a bit of a close-up. Apologies for any background noise you can hear, by the way. My neighbour's renovating his garage at the moment, so apologies for that. I'm pretty sure with this microphone placed where it is, you can still hear me. Right, let me give you a close-up. Look down here, for example, a perfect example. I'll just remove these weeds, but there you can see, coming out of the base, a brand new colocasia, and another there. And there are more at the back of this plant coming up. So already from one corm in the centre, let me just remove that leaf there using my secateurs. We have one plant with 1, 2, 3, 4 little babies around it. This is the amazing thing about this plant. Each one of these plants next spring could be separated off from this and planted and create a little baby plant. Let me show you an example of a baby plant that I did this with only a few months ago over here. And here they are. These are those examples of baby plants which I separated off. There's one, tiny little thing, no bigger than my hand. But when you compare that and my hand to some of the others, they all started off like this. Isn't that incredible? And there's a medium-sized small one at the back of that, another. And you can see here some more babies emerging out of the rear of this big specimen. And so what I need to do now is dig all these up. At one stage I was tempted to leave a couple in the ground and see if they survive the winter, but I've changed my mind on that. I'm just not going to risk it. These plants are too valuable to me. Each one of these could be worth £10 if I sold it, so why would I waste money? So I'm going to use my fork now and as carefully as possible start digging these up. I'll see you in a moment when I've dug them all up and placed them in individual pots. Well, that was an interesting experience. You certainly don't need a gym when you've got a garden like this, and I feel like one of those big game fishermen with his catch laid out in front of him. And I've got various different sizes. Most of them have gone in pots, but there are 4, 5 big specimens here which just won't fit in pots, and I want to show you these up in a little bit more detail because I remember now, I was reminded of last year when this happened. Just take this example down here. I mean, look at this here. This just shows you how well these propagate when they're in the right conditions, and you can see at the base of this was the original plant going up here, but look, 1, 2, 3, 4 little sprouts coming off that. Now last year I had one like this, and over winter when it was in storage in a frost-free environment, this centre bit died, and then all these grew into individual plants and I was able to separate them. Some of them actually at this stage would separate quite readily, but none of these actually do. They're all attached to that central corm, so I will leave those in place and I will put that into a large pot. It will fit in a large pot, that, in some of this lovely soil. However, let me find one where I can separate one off for you, possibly this one. There we go, there's an example. Look, now if I tease and wriggle, eventually that is going to come away with its own little corm and its own little set of roots. Like a little baby miracle really, isn't it? And there's the original corm and the original plant, and that still has 1, 2, 3, the evidence of 4 new sprouts coming out of it. That will now fit in a pot in dry soil, and that will go in its own pot. So I'm going to spend a few minutes now just seeing which I can separate off and seeing which I need to leave on the original corm. And then what I'm going to do is plant them up in that soil that I've already shown you. And when I see you in a moment, I will have a run of pots all planted up with individual colocasias, or possibly even colocasias with sprouts coming out. See you in a minute. So there you go. They're all replanted into topsoil. Now, if these were being planted for the growing season, obviously they would go into enriched compost. But this is just soil because, in my opinion, this is not a growing medium. It's a storage medium. It's just to store them over the cold period until spring, late spring, when they can be planted out again. So all it really has to do is hold them and insulate them a little bit from a very cold spell. There are some little baby ones and some very mature ones at the back here, and I even planted up some little spiky things that fell off the corms which look like they might turn into plants. Now, if all these survive, not only will I be very surprised, I'll be highly delighted, but gardening's not like that, so I'll give it my best shot at keeping them going. But some of these small ones, you know, you have to think the worst really. I'll be very surprised if some of these make it through the winter. I took another decision, which was to take all the leaves off the top of all the stalks because they were acting as a bit of a sail and the plants were rocking. I'm going to leave these outside for another few weeks, and I'm hoping that they will put few new roots down into this soil before I have to then move them into the shed. And I will move them into the shed when there's a forecast of any temperatures below 4 degrees. So at that point they'll go into the shed for storage for the whole of the winter season, and I will just stop watering them. In fact, I'm not going to water them again now. I'll let rain water them if we have any. In the next few weeks we'll go into winter proper. It'll start getting cold. I'll get them in the shed. Now I'm going to put a little cutaway for you to see now, because it's a little trick I picked up off TikTok actually. If there are any real cold spells forecast, I'm going to light a candle, a tea light, an 8-hour tea light under a plant pot, and apparently that will just take the frost or the freezing temperatures off the inside of the shed. It's really important that these are not allowed to freeze, but they can be allowed to dry out. Hope you found that interesting. I've had a great workout. I'm going to leave these here, as I say, for a while, and then any forecast of frost I'll get inside. What's your experience of overwintering Colocasia Esculenta. Let me know in the comments box below. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Hit the notifications bell so that I can update you on these in the springtime. And of course, if you want one of these, they're all going to be for sale in the spring. So let me know. And I'll put a reserve label on it for you. There's about 40 here. 3 or 4 of them are already reserved, I have to say. I've already had some messages. And I'll see you soon.